Without screams, there is no power. These words come from the early scenes in the movie Monsters Incorporated. In this movie, we have Mike and Sully. They work for Monsters, Inc. It's a company whose job is to create the energy that helps the little monster world survive. Sully is one of the top scarers. His job is to go through these doors that are pathways into the bedrooms of children, and then to terrify those children. Mike sits outside the door and collects those screams into these canisters that then allow them to transfer those screams into the energy that powers their world. Without screams, then, there is no power. This is an unquestioned assumption that they have in this monster world, and it's not the only one. They are told at one point that the most dangerous and toxic thing you can encounter is what? A human child. And they really do believe this. These monsters that go in to scare the children are actually terrified of the children themselves. There's a scene where one of the monsters comes kind of strutting out after he's scared a kid, and he's got a tiny little sock on his back, and they have to call this like 2219 code, and they send him in hazmat suits, and they blow up the sock, and they shave him bald so they can get rid of all of the toxicity of that little child that he almost touched. So those are the first two. Without screams, there is no power, and the most dangerous and toxic thing you can encounter is a little child. The third one is actually the motto of the company. We scare because we care. We scare because we care. Now, they don't really care about the little children. They care about their community, that they have power and energy and all of the things that make life good, and so they have to go do this scaring. And when you take those three assumptions together, you see that these monsters behave in a certain way. They're proud of scaring children. They compete to see who's the best at it. They have a scare record that Sully is chasing after, trying to get to, so that they can really be good at this scaring thing. We scare because we care. The Christmas story begins with an emperor that has called for a census, and a super pregnant young woman and her husband travel to go be counted. And it's easy to think, well, maybe they didn't have to go. Why just not go? But you can't not go in the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire could just as easily have had the motto, we scare because we care, because they led with fear. They came in and they conquered you with their military, and then they would bring some good things that made it look like they cared. They were good at running a city. They were good at administration. They were good at building roads and bringing water, and sometimes even bringing a measure of peace if your community had had some tribal warfare kind of things going on. But they would also then let your leaders stay in place and have local leadership. They would let you practice your religion, as long as neither of those things challenged the empire. If we fast forward to Easter, we would hear about a guy called Pontius Pilate. We know outside of Scripture from other places that he would, as festivals approached, and lots of Jewish people would be coming to gather in Jerusalem, and he wanted to make sure there wasn't any trouble. He would crucify a couple of Jewish people just to remind them all who was in charge. That's leading with fear. So they scared because they cared. Without screams, they had no power. They left their army there to intimidate and make sure that the people were good and full of fear so that they could control them. And all of this resided on two things that were really unquestioned truths. One is what they called the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. That peace came through military might. And then they heavily taxed you, because to support the empire you have to have wealth. So when you take military might and wealth, you had these two pillars that were really unquestioned things that allowed the Roman Empire to be who they were, to come in and control you with fear, to scare you, because they really did care. I would love to tell you that 2,000 years later we have started to question those two truths, that military might and wealth are the way to safety and happiness, but that is exactly the place that we live in. We think if we have the biggest army, we think if we have the biggest pile of money, that we will somehow have security, safety, happiness, and really life that is well lived. And yet, we find ourselves living in times of great fear. When we gather this night, you all come with fear. Some of them are personal fears about your health, or about your marriage, or about your job. Some of them are more communal fears that we share. We worry and fear about the economy and what's going to happen collectively. We worry about safety. We worry about people breaking into our homes. We worry about terrorism. We worry about Muslims, and are they all terrorists? We do indeed actually worry about little children. We think that some of them are dangerous and toxic if they come from certain parts of the world. And so we live in all of this fear that's around us all the time, because we've still bought into the idea that military might and wealth are the things that are going to bring us wholeness and happiness. And so we continue to chase those things, not questioning that these things are true. And yet, the first thing that the angel says, gathered above these shepherds and telling them this great news, is do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. It is not fear that leads the way. Early in the movie Monsters Incorporated, you find out that there is actually a power shortage. They're having trouble scaring kids. Kids are growing up and they're not as scared as they used to be, so they can't get as much power out of fear, which means that fear only goes so far. It can work for a little while, but it's not going to take us all the way to rich, meaningful lives that we can live. In that movie, this little child actually makes it into the monster world. They call her Boo. And Boo comes along, and is Boo dangerous? Not in the way that they think, right? They think if a child touches you, you will die. She's not dangerous in that way, but she is dangerous. The danger she brings is that she will turn their world completely on its head, change everything and transform everything. And not everybody wants that to happen. And she brings love. She comes into their world and she sees these big scary monsters and she laughs at them and she giggles. And they come to find out that her laughter is 10 times more powerful than her screams. And so what you see in this story is love countering fear, love really gobbling up fear, love coming into a place that was driven by fear and transforming it entirely. At the end of the movie, they still are going into kids' rooms, but now they're trying to make them laugh because they have figured out that love is more powerful than fear. I never thought of Monsters, Inc. as a Christmas story, but it really is, because in the Christmas story, Jesus comes into the world filled with fear and brings love. For I think all of human history, people have been afraid of gods, and Christianity is no different. There's a huge strand of Christianity that has always depicted God as this big, angry being that dangles us over hot fire to try to get us to behave. We try to scare people into being good people by saying, you better behave or the fire's on the other side. And if God really was that way, would God not come to us as a monster to really terrify us into behaving well and being good people? But that's not how God comes. The story of Christmas is this baby that is not strong or powerful, does not come from military might, does not come from wealth, but comes from a poor village, born in a stable because there's no room for this poor little child. And that little baby brings love and hope and absolutely transforms the world. And Herod understood this somehow. He was scared of that child because he knew he was dangerous. Not dangerous in a military might kind of way, but dangerous in a transform your world with love kind of way. And this is the story of Christmas, bringing love in to just suck up all of that fear and all of that hatred and transform the world into a different kind of place. As we gather on Christmas, we are not Monsters Incorporated, but we are Jesus' church incorporated in this world to carry that story of love along, to be that presence of love in the world. And so we can take maybe some of these unquestioned truths from Monsters Incorporated and turn them into some new truths that we carry with ourselves. Instead of saying that without screams there is no power, we can say that without love there is no real power in this world, that love is the most powerful thing we can carry. We can say that children are the most precious thing that we have, no matter where they come from, and that we can invest in them. And we can talk about the baby Jesus as the most precious of those precious children that brings us this gift of love. And then instead of saying we scare because we care, we can say that we love because we care. We serve because we care. We forgive because we care. We have mercy and compassion because we care. We share because we care. We do all of this because we care about this love that has been given to us by Jesus, not because we earned it, not because we're great people, but because God gifted this to us on Christmas. So as we go out this night, may we be blessed to carry that love with us. May it be a light that shines brightly within us so that all people might know that love, and that love is stronger than fear, and that life is in that very love and light that we have been given. Amen.
Amen.